Morning, everybody. My name is Danny Gutierrez. It is Monday, June 8th of 2020. It's a very beautiful morning right now. And I just wanted to talk about everything that transpired at UFC 250. And holy cow, all the bantamweights really did shine through that night. First off, with Sugar Sean O'Malley and Eddie Wineland, actually, hold on one second, because there's one fight that I did want to talk about before that, and that was Alex Cceres versus Chase Hooper. Now, Chase Hooper was one of those Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialists. There we go. Kind of like guys like Damian Maia, Charles Oliveira, but he was undefeated, 9-0, but he was in the developmental stages of his career, especially in terms of his style. He's the youngest kid on the UFC roster. He's only 20 years old. He's younger than me. Coming up against a guy named Alex Bruce Leroy Cceres, is a distance striker, can switch stances, is very adept in both southpaw and orthodox. He does like to utilize the jab a lot, and you saw that night. He was just picking him apart from distance. He even entertained some exchanges on the ground when Chase Hooper was looking for a heel hook. Alex Cceres was just rolling with him and staying on top and utilizing ground and pound. But, I mean, Alex Cceres has been in there with Kron Gracie. It didn't go well for him, unfortunately. But if you look at all of his losses, even, you know, his first couple losses that against guys like Mackin's Semazir and Jim Hedes, they all took him down and controlled him and choked him out. And you would have to imagine him fighting in 2 weight classes since then. He had enough experience to kind of nullify the specific techniques implemented on the ground by Chase Hooper. He was just ready for them. Whereas Kron Gracie was just on a whole nother level, where he did the horse kick and just initiated the clinch and tripped him, took him down. It was very, very textbook, and there was nothing that Alex Cceres was going to be able to do to get out of that. I know I look groggy, guys. I have morning allergies, and like I said, there's nothing I can really do about it other than just enjoy the beautiful day. But regardless, yeah, that prelim was amazing. The Alex Cceres fight versus Chase Hooper was phenomenal. Alex Cceres defeated Chase Hooper via unanimous decision. It was just a clinic on the feet. And it was a phenomenal display of experience by Alex Cceres. Chase Hooper, he's got a lot of work to do. I think he does have room to grow. I think his body is still growing at 20 years old. Who knows where he'll be at. So moving on from that, Sugar Sean O'Malley opened up the pay-per-view card against Eddie Wineland, who was the former WEC bantamweight champion, and had fought a ton of guys coming into this fight. Sugar Sean O'Malley had not fought anybody with the resume of Eddie Wineland up until this point, and he made it look easy. Sugar Sean O'Malley utilized what in Jeet Kune Do what we would call progressive indirect attack. Now, progressive indirect attack means basically where you utilize a series of straight punches to kind of get a read on your opponent. They don't have to be straight punches, but it's recommended that you utilize straight punches so that you can keep your distance and you don't get hit as you're trying to establish your distance, so a jab or a cross. And then you start feinting and utilizing your jukes. At least this is just the way I was taught or explained that progressive indirect attack was. So when you start to get a read on your opponent and your opponent starts reacting to what you're doing, is basically when you're able to implement your progressive indirect attack. So he faked with an uppercut and a lead hook. He didn't even throw these punches until the cross landed, but in real time it only looked like he threw one punch until you saw the replay and they slowed it down for you a little bit. You saw him want to throw 2 punches, but it was just to get Eddie Wineland to react and put his hands down so that that cross was just on the button, and it just landed flush, and that was a bad knockout. That was just as bad as Renan Barão, because Eddie Wineland had taken a spinning back kick for the interim UFC bantamweight title a few years ago, many years ago, when Renan Barão was the man. at 135 pounds. But Eddie Wineland had caught a spinning back kick flush to the face, and it kind of stunned him. This was just a cross, and this one flatlined him. This one flatlined him. He just fell, and there was nothing he could do. There was nothing he could do, and it was a walk-off knockout by Sugar Sean O'Malley. Very reminiscent of Mark Hunt, the Super Samoan at heavyweight. Mark Hunt. What more can you say? That's some Roy Jones Jr. stuff. When you could implement a walk-off knockout and make it look easy against somebody who has well over 35 fights, just within 40 fights, I believe, for Eddie Wineland. But yeah, man, it's just one of those things. But moving up in the card, there was Neil Magny versus Anthony Rocco Martin. Now, Anthony Rocco Martin used to be, he trains at American Top Team first of all with guys like Jorge Masvidal, Dustin Poirier, the Lima brothers, now Edson Barboza, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Like, there's a whole bunch of talent to work with at American Top Team. Like, you don't understand. The level of competition that trains at American Top Team is world class. And Anthony Rocco Martin was on a little bit of a run at welterweight. He's one of those fighters that is coming up from lightweight at 155 to 170. You see that a lot. You see a lot of guys trying to implement filling themselves up and trying to get a lot of muscle and trying to fill up those 15 pounds of muscle so they don't have to cut much, just so you can walk in healthy on the fight, which makes sense. You don't want to overly dehydrate yourself, even with the ban of IVs and USADA and everything going. Everything with the way everybody's being tested nowadays. But regardless, he was fighting Neil Magny, who had been out for a very long time. We actually hadn't seen him fight since his loss to oh my goodness, it's gonna kill me. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name right now, but he was in a main event, and he's a Venezuelan Brazilian fighter. This is going to kill me. But Neil Magny was coming up off of a main event loss and a very long layoff, and in this sport, you're only as good as your last fight. So there was a lot of momentum for Anthony Rocco Martin coming into this fight, and it was pretty interesting to see because Anthony Rocco Martin is one of those. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. He likes to utilize his ground game a lot. Neil Magny is much more of a distance fighter. He loves to stay light on his feet. He loves to put his heels on the back of the octagon, and utilize the 1-2. He loves switching stances and cutting corners and trying to get his heel to the center of the octagon as best as he can. But otherwise, he'll utilize fakes and feints to set up angles, even if his heels are firmly up against the cage. But if you have him square up, that's where a lot of guys have had success against Neil Magny, is where they could kind of trap him against the cage and get him square to where he can't switch stances. Anthony Rocco Martin, it was a back and forth fight. It was a good fight. They had their moments. Each man had their moments, but in the end, it was Neil Magny, his experience and his grit and his willingness to take chances and more willingness to throw effective shots is what got it done against Anthony Rocco Martin. Anthony Rocco Martin had actually tagged him with a right hand, and it had him in trouble in a few moments. But other than that, Neil Magny's experience pulled through. Unanimous decision I didn't necessarily agree with. I definitely felt like Anthony Rocco Martin won that second round. But, you know, Neil Magny walks away with the win. So, in the first round of the unnamed Bantamweight Grand Prix of Aljamain Sterling and Corey Sandhagen. Now, I mentioned in my last video that I had never seen Corey Sandhagen fight. I went back and I watched his very first fight in the UFC, and man, it was at featherweight, first of all, and it was a late notice fight, and he was lighting his opponent up on his feet. I had no idea that he had striking like that, and it was so fluid, and it was powerful, and it was fast, and it was accumulative. I loved his lead uppercut leg kick that was very reminiscent of Jose Aldo from back in the day. he looked really good. He was implementing a lot of body kicks. He was utilizing a lot of lateral movement, a lot of faking and feinting. He looked like a world-class kickboxer. Looking at Aljamain Sterling's fights, a lot of his losses have been to the specialists, guys, or the veterans, guys like you know, Brian Caraway or Marlon Moraes. Other than that, he hasn't had, other than those couple of losses, he hasn't had much trouble inside the octagon. He's a pretty decent boxer. He's got pretty good body kicks himself. He switches stances, but not so much to utilize his striking. So usually when a grappler switches stances, they're putting their power leg forward so that they could shoot a power single and or double, and they don't even necessarily need to utilize they don't even need to get the takedown fully, excuse me. They just need to even engage in the clinch very firmly, and that will hopefully get them up against the cage, and they're able to kind of grind out fight from there. You saw Randy Couture do that a lot back in the day, and there are actually a pair of light heavyweights that were doing that on the undercard. Their names are Mitch Clark. Mitch Clark was doing that against the guy, and he was just making him wear his weight, and he eked out a decision against the guy who was undefeated. But that's kind of the style that Aljamain Sterling likes to implement on these bantamweights. He's a long bantamweight, but he's real filled in, you know what I mean? He's those long guys that's got some muscle to him, you know what I mean? And he's a very powerful grappler. He's very powerful. He's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Matt Serra over the East Coast. He trains a lot with Ray Longo, who's the boxing coach, and who's done a lot of great work with Chris Weidman. This was a high-stakes fight for both guys, for both Corey Sandhagen and Aljamain Sterling. So as soon as that fight started, the eyes of the division were on this fight, because this is basically a #1 contendership fight. Both guys were on a run. Corey Sandhagen was undefeated in the UFC, only had one loss from the LFA. And Aljamain Sterling is on this run. So Corey Sandhagen threw a body kick when his back was up against the cage, and basically Aljamain Sterling caught that kick and took him down. He turned it into a single. He took him down. He took his back like it was like spreading butter on toast. Like, it was crisp. That technique was crisp. There was nothing. He didn't even utilize ground and pound to try and advance. He just switched position to position, and he got the body triangle from the back, and he just knew. He kept switching the chokes. He kept hand fighting. He kept making Corey Sandhagen think, and when somebody has your back, you panic, because that's the worst position to be in other than mount. When you're on your back, you messed up a long time ago. If you end up on your back, and if you're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist, yeah, you can kind of get to your feet, but if somebody passes your legs, you messed up a long time ago. And not to say that Corey Sandhagen's ground game is actually pretty legit too. Watching some grappling videos of his, and watching his first fight, he actually utilized the takedown when he didn't need to. He just wanted to get the point, and he just wanted to be dominant in that fight. But Aljamain Sterling's black belt under Matt Serra is on a whole nother level. It's on a whole nother level. And he took his back, implemented the body triangle, was hand fighting. He choked him out. Corey Sandhagen tapped, but he was still unconscious by that point. It was over. Aljamain Sterling won. Aljamain Sterling is arguably your #1 contender at 135 pounds. Now, the co-main event to this fight, which was actually a great fight. It was a great showcase, actually. It was a good showcase of maturity, actually, when it came to this fight. It was Cody Garbrandt versus Rafael Assunção. Now, Rafael Assunção is a very long-time veteran of the WEC. He's at 37 years old. Fighting at two different weight classes of 145 and 135. He's found success at 135, but he hasn't gotten that title shot. And coming into this bout, he was coming off of 2 losses, and both fights were very close. Both fights were phenomenally close. And Rafael Assunção was on the wrong end of was just not on the wrong end of a bad decision. He was just shy of those techniques. He was just very shy of those techniques. You guys probably hear the neighbors. Cody Garbrandt coming into this fight had 3 losses in a row, and it was at one point in time where he was the champion. He was a 135-pound champion, and he was the man at 135 pounds at one point. So, being trained under guys like Uriah Faber, training at Team Alpha Male, doing this for just a short amount of time. I think Luke Thomas was saying within a calendar year, Cody Garbrandt was unranked and he was a champion all of a sudden. And it's pretty impressive, actually. You don't necessarily hear that all that much. The only guy that we've seen capable of doing that is Israel Adesanya, of recent memory. You could say Conor McGregor, yeah, but the UFC actually was smart and built him up slowly and slowly and slowly. But Conor McGregor was all Conor McGregor, man. He's on a whole another level himself. But Cody Garbrandt was getting there, man. He was a marketable guy. He was a, he can fight, he can scrap. He had very heavy hands. He had a real good team behind him. When he first won the belt, he gave it to somebody that had a rare blood disease. Like, he was a gentleman's gentleman, and he was a fighter. So when he lost those 2 fights to TJ Dillashaw, and then TJ Dillashaw popped for EPO after his loss to Henry Cejudo at 125 pounds, and then Cody Garbrandt losing his fight to Pedro Munoz. I was about to say, don't let me forget that name. Pedro the Rock Munoz, a good overhand right, a good inboxing, good guillotines. Cody Garbrandt made a lot of poor decisions in that bout. So, coming off of 3 losses, the 2 back-to-back rematches to Dillashaw, and then, he dropped one to Pedro Munoz. He actually went to the East Coast with guys like Mark Henry and cleaned up his, who trains with guys like Frankie Edgar and Marlon Moraes, to clean up his striking, because Mark Henry got his striking patterns down to a science. And you hear stories of him writing everything down in notebooks, and him cataloging everything on a fighter, being very training specific on a fighter and what they need. And you saw that in this fight, actually. He actually looked very patient. He picked his shots. He was utilizing fakes and feints. He didn't get emotional when he got tagged. He moved away, and he was composed. Like, this was a championship level Cody Garbrandt. This was Cody Garbrandt 2.0. And it actually looked like that Rafael Santos was going to put up more of a fight until the very last second. As the bell rang, Cody Garbrandt had his back up against the cage as Rafael Santos was squaring him up. Cody Garbrandt just took this right hand from his waist. He took it from California to New York and just knocked out Rafael Santos as the bell rang. As the bell rang at the end of the second round, Cody Garbrandt showed everybody what's up. He showed everybody what's up. And it's going to be very exciting to see, with all of these bantamweights just coming in here at UFC 250 and showing up, the entire card going, we are here. We're not just small guys. We can also fight, and we can make names for ourselves. So at 135 pounds, yeah, I'd keep an eye on 135 pounds in the UFC, especially since that title is vacant. It's going to be very interesting to see who they pair up who with, because you got Peter Yan out there as well. There's a whole bunch of guys at 135 pounds. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, the main event, Amanda Nunez versus Felicia Spencer. Listen, I'm not going to say anything that hasn't been said already about Amanda Nunez. She's the GOAT. She's the women's GOAT. In this fight, it looked like she was on cruise control. Now, that's not to say anything bad about Felicia Spencer, because she's got a phenomenal martial arts background herself. She only dropped that one loss to Chris Cyborg, but Chris Cyborg dropped one. Sorry, there's cicadas out here. I already had one land on me on my shirt back here and one land on my finger right here. Just like, hey, what are you doing? Just hanging out? But no, Amanda Nunez against Felicia Spencer was a blowout. It looked like Amanda Nunez was on cruise control the entire time. Whenever Felicia Spencer tried to implement her game, Amanda Nunez actually thrived in it and showed her that she was better at everything she did and more. Being a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt herself, beating girls like Ronda Rousey, Miesha Tate, Holly Holm, these former world champions that Felicia Spencer just doesn't have under her belt. You know, she unfortunately, her only couple formal titleists were under her belt were Megan Anderson, well, that was Invicta. She was they were basically two former Invicta featherweight champions going up against each other, and she took her down and choked her out. And the other one was against Cris Cyborg, and she dropped that one, and she made it a good fight. She told you that she could stay in there, and in this fight, it was more of the same. She showed you that she could stay in there, but I feel like Amanda Nunez could have finished her whenever she wanted, however she wanted to. She just didn't. Again, it looked like she was on cruise control the entire time. She was just better everywhere. She just hit her hard. She cut her open. She over on the side of the temple. She was making her bleed. She was, you know, bruising her up. There were mouses under her eyes that were bleeding as well. Felicia Spencer, I think Amanda Nunez had maybe barely a bloody nose after some jabs from Felicia Spencer, but even you could even tell the difference in power between Amanda Nunez and Felicia Spencer was just, and it's ridiculous. It was, you felt bad watching Felicia Spencer take this beating. You could have arguably stopped it at the end of the fourth round. If the coaches really wanted to throw in the towel, nobody would have, you know, blamed them or anything like that. But Amanda Nunez carries that power at 135 pounds as well. she carries that at 135 pounds as well. So being powerful in two weight classes, 10 pounds apart, she's something special. She's something special. Now, the question is, what's next? Who's next? She talked about taking time off with Nina Ansaroff. They said that they wanted to have a child soon. I don't know what that entails. Really none of our business, but kind of sounded like she wanted to take time off, that she had a busy work schedule and two weight classes, and who can blame her? Yeah, it'll be pretty interesting to see what happens in the future of the women's featherweight and bantamweight division, since there really is no rankings for women's featherweights, because there aren't enough women in the world to establish a weight class and make a bracket for it. And at 135 pounds, she's already cleared. She's cleared out that division. She's cleared out that division virtually. Now, it could be a matter of establishing contenders in two different weight classes and building brackets and building a weight class and seeing who the best is. But I mean, the closest you can get is maybe Megan Anderson, but I don't see. I'm a fan of Megan Anderson. I love Megan Anderson, but I don't see. It's when you watch her fight against Felicia Spencer, and then you watch Felicia Spencer against Amanda Nunez and Cris Cyborg, you wonder what would happen. You wonder what would happen. You wonder what would happen. So maybe she went on a little bit of a winning streak and cleaned up the holes in her ground game. Maybe, very much so. But we saw glimpses of that in her Invicta days when she became champion. She was slated to fight Cris Cyborg, and maybe we wonder what that fight would have looked like, but who knows? You know, styles make fights. It didn't happen. And now we're here. Amanda Nunez is the woman. And UFC 145 pounds and 135 pounds too. And now the question is, what's next? She's probably going to take time off. I can't really say for sure. Only Amanda Nunez knows. But it sounded like at her post-fight press conference and her post-fight interviews that she wanted to take some time off with her partner, Nina Ansaroff. But yeah, this has been a very beautiful morning of the Total Fight Mike. I will do a preview for the main event coming this weekend. We'll have that to you by the end of the week. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Neighborhood dog. And I will see you guys in the sequel. Please be sure to share, like, and subscribe. And thank you to my editor, Pat. Bye, everybody.